Welcome to Deep Thought. Physical cast. Physical cast. You know what? And this could be controversial, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. See, I'm going to tell you what. Like I said, I've been paying attention to subcultures and everything. And I've been paying attention, well, just loose attention to class ever since I was young. Like I said, just the way I was living, I could spend a week with the lumpen proletariat and then, go visit my grandmother, uncle or stuff and ride on my pony. So I've seen this class thing, but I don't know when it was. Oh, no, I know when it was. It's probably in the 90s. And it was early 90s. I encountered this young lady who she was white, and she was from a lumpen proletariat background, but she was actually working her way up. She was actually legitimately working her way out of her background, like legitimately had lived in a trailer and everything. And that's the first time I noticed something, her physicality. Because let's be real, when we talk about the booty, the black woman is known for it, but this white woman had a booty that, shoot, sisters will look at her and say, damn, girl, what you do? And honestly, that's when I first thought about it, like some of the things she was saying and everything. That's when I really first started thinking about class, because I remember she was talking about where she was from, and she was talking about all these women were pregnant, having babies, living off the state. And I was about to get hot because, the stereotype was that was black women. She said, no, where she from was like 98% white. So, and that's when I first started paying attention. I started looking at men and women in different social classes, not for the economic thing, but just the sheer physicality. Sheer physicality. If you pay attention to different classes, there's a different physicality. You can almost look at them. And, different markers. Like, okay, you're talking about the lower classes. Usually not eating the best of foods. You'd be hard-pressed to find a gym. Now, except for, the athletes. You ain't they ain't going to be the best of shape as they get older. Maybe when they're young, but, And then you got young ladies popping out babies early and everything. In fact, here's something. Here's an example. I remember it was back in D.C. There was two parties I went to back to back. One on a Friday, one on a Saturday. One was a party, and it's within the black community. And it had it was a pool party. And one thing I noticed, I was like, wow, these women look good in bikinis. This was more somewhere between a ratchet class and lower working class. A lot of people. I just knew one of the young ladies who was more working class who had invited me. But I was like, wow, these women got flat stomachs. They really don't need to be wearing bikinis. And I was just I really peeped it. And, and the dudes, big big, stocky dudes, everything. Look like they definitely work for a living. And that's cool. Look like they, work what they have. Okay. And then, all right. And they, had a certain look to them. And unfortunately, even a complexion to them. And the reason let's be clear, the reason I'm using the black community as an example, because I'm most familiar with it. But I've seen the same thing in white communities and actually loosely in the Hispanic communities, not as much in the Asian communities, at least in this country. Now, someone from an Asian country could probably enlighten me a bit more. Because one thing in this country, Asian groups as a tendency tend to be at least well off economically overall. I'm sure there's some poor, of course, but, usually everybody making money. But anyway, went to the party, and I was like, okay. I was looking at the women, and, I was like, okay, wasn't, decent shape, but you could tell, they wouldn't be considered dimes. Okay. So I went to another party. It was at a hotel the next day. These were like black Barbies and Kens. These were more upper class. Like 98% of the women had flat stomachs. They had a pure, clean look to them. They look like black Barbies, literally the women. And the guys were very clean cut and everything. And I noticed the physicality between the two groups. Like the men and women of the upper classes were a little bit more slimmer, whereas the lower class ones had more weight. And I started looking at that. And I started, And I've actually noticed that in different classes. See, and this is something that someone had talked about the classes. A couple writers had talked about, like the upper classes, like they are very into staying in shape, eating well, not drinking and smoking and anything that can ruin their body. They got access to medical care and everything. And you're sitting back and you're just like, Now, this is interesting. This is definitely interesting. This is something that you want to really think about. And I was thinking about that. It was like, okay, I've talked about the castes that are coming. I already talked about the social classes. What happens if there's a physical difference? In fact, I had told somebody one time, this is specifically related to the black community. I said, I can almost look at an upper class black person like part of the black elite, considered the black elite. They actually physically look different from most black people. And of course, their background was based off of interracial couplings back in the 19th century. And the children, they have them, then they marry each other. They look a certain way. They actually physically do look a certain way. Like I can take a look, almost to the point that I can almost look at somebody and get a general idea about their social class just from their physicality. And indeed, even when, and that was just in the black community. But then, as being around more whites in college, graduate school, and then, living in areas where they're predominantly white, then I start picking up the difference there too. So it's bigger than a racial thing. I first saw it in the black community, but then when I saw the stuff, I was like, hold up. This is interesting. It's like there's a physical difference. You all can almost take a look at them and say, okay, this is their background. This is where they from. Like everything. It's a look. It's a physicality. And that's actually creating a physical caste too. Indeed, it's a strong connection to the economic class. Indeed, now when I first started talking about caste this week, I talked about the book by Isabel Wilkerson, Caste, where it's just focused on the race. I would say this, it's getting deeper than race because one, the races are mixing a whole lot more. One of the fastest growing groups in the country is the multiracial population. So it's like, and, just with everything happening, classes they change. It's becoming more economic, physical. Not as much religious. That's not paying as much of an attention. But actually, religion do play a part in it, though. Because if you look at different classes, the way that they express themselves religiously can be different. And there's a lot of stuff. And then we can't even get into the subcultures. That's another conversation. But the physical thing, I'm like, And see, one thing about the physicality, people will tend to mate with people of a similar physicality. That's a deep thing, seriously. People will tend to find most attractive someone of a similar physicality. Tend to, anyway. That's not absolute. But if you start throwing in class and, what people do, how they eat and how they carrying stuff, you can almost see it. Now, it's tough. Now, it's a tough one. Like I said, this requires, to really establish that, I would have to do a whole lot more research and see if anybody else has picked up on anything. But actually, like I said, there's been a couple writers who actually have. They were talking about the upper classes and how they are physically different. And one actually used the word, like they actually look better. They actually used that word. I was like, man. So, it's an interesting thing. And, I'm even talking about it because, on this side, I just want you to think. If you can hit me with something, because y'all notice whatever you say, I'm hearting the comment because, like I said, As long as you don't attack somebody, I'm good with whatever you put out because I'm trying to learn some stuff too. And there's always been plenty of stuff in life that I would see, but nobody else will corroborate it or something. So I still think about it. But then somebody else talking about it, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one who sees this, So it's just something to think about. Something I'm kind of peeping. Like I said, I would have to do some more serious research to really look at it. And I kind of do anyway. I pay attention. Wherever I am, I pay attention to class. Like if I'm going through Baltimore or something, driving through one of the rougher neighborhoods, I'm paying attention to how everybody looks, their physicality, how healthy they look, And then where I live about less than a 10-minute drive away from some actual mansions and everything. So I pay attention to people in that area. So it's something to think about. So anyway, that's all I got for now. Get back with y'all. Peace and blessings.